Hi, I'm making this video to talk about my own personal experience studying as an exchange student in Milan in Italy over the past year. I was studying the master's course in management engineering at the Bovisa campus of Politecnico di Milano, and I was studying from September 2022 right up until July 2023. It's a pretty popular university for international students, so I just thought I'd make this video to point out some of the pros and cons that I found both with the university and the Italian university system, as well as some advice that I might have and some differences that I found studying in the UK versus studying in Italy. Firstly, looking at things from just a studying perspective, this was one of the biggest shocks that I had moving from the UK to Italy, is that my schedule at university was very different and it took some time to get used to. Basically, all of my study at my time at Politecnico di Milano revolved around lectures, which are 3.5 hours long, and you can sometimes have 2 lectures per day, which is 7 hours of sitting in a lecture hall. This is very different to the UK, obviously, where we have much shorter lectures and also seminars, which help keep things a bit more engaging, whereas in Italy, you were literally just sat in the lecture hall taking notes for the full time. Personally, I wasn't a big fan of this way of studying. I thought that it could get very tiring, especially if you had 2 lectures per day. If you sat there for 7 hours, there's only so much information that your brain can take in, and I thought that it would have been much better to have a more engaging kind of study, like we typically do here in the UK, with a lot more discussion, rather than just having a person talk at you for 3.5 hours. Obviously, the schedule would differ depending on which module you take and which track you're on. However, I think it's fair to say that the Italian system is sort of much more intense than in the UK, with a much more emphasis on getting through as much content as possible. I'd just say this is something to keep in mind if you're considering studying in Italy. Just sort of take a look at what your typical weekly lectures would look like, because maybe this way of studying isn't for you. I certainly wasn't really aware of it before I went, and it sort of took me a long time to actually get in the habits and get used to it. In terms of assessments, they were also pretty different to what I'm used to. Basically, modules are assessed out of 30 marks, with 18 being the pass grade, which is 60%, which is pretty high compared to here in the UK where it's 40. For most of my modules, the assessments also contained an element of group work in them, which could range from 20% of the grade all the way up to 50. And this was probably one of the most interesting parts of studying in Italy, because although it was difficult group work, this was the chance where you could really sort of see how it is to work with a range of people from so many different countries and different cultures, and this was probably one of the most rewarding parts of my study at PoliMi. Because I was also doing the Masters in Management Engineering, it meant that I got to work with a lot of people from different backgrounds. So there was like mechanical engineers, civil engineers, and other people just taking courses in management. So it was pretty interesting to work with people who I'd never worked with before and sort of see how other people think from different backgrounds and different specializations. That being said, the group work wasn't necessarily easy. It was very time consuming was the main thing, and balancing that with the amount of lectures that you had made it pretty difficult to organise, especially when people have different modules and things like that, and keeping on track and on schedule with both the group work and your own individual lectures was something that I found particularly difficult. I think you get the idea now that basically if you want to study at Politecnico or a similar university in Italy, you sort of got to be prepared to put in the hours. It's not like here in the UK where you can sort of work harder for certain time periods and then ease off. It's sort of go all semester, and even worse at the end of the semester during the exam periods. It's also worth noting that you get 5 attempts to take each exam during the year, which is pretty nice because you can sort of plot out when you want to take each one to stop you getting as overwhelmed, and meaning that you don't have to study every single module that you're taking at once. So I think at Politecnico you can take exams in January, February, June, July and in September. So if you fail an exam, it's not the end of the world. You have 4 more attempts to take it. This can certainly help mitigate at least a little bit of the stress during the exam periods, because you sort of know it's not the end of the world if you fail the exam, because you can always retake it within a month. Just to wrap up, I'd say that my time studying at Politecnico di Milano was difficult, and it took me a lot of time to get used to the way of teaching there, and it's pretty intense, which is something just to keep in mind if you're thinking of studying at the university. However, the quality of teaching was very good for the most part, and I think I definitely learned a lot whilst I was there, but I just was not prepared for the intensity of the workload, that's all. The social side of the university was actually very good for an exchange student. The Politecnico specifically has a very big Erasmus Student Network group, which organise events around Italy in different countries, and also nights out in Milan. And this was where I met everybody who I became friends with, was through these ESN events. ESN host a welcome week just before study starts. So for students like me who went without knowing anybody else who was there, this was the perfect opportunity to meet other people in the same position and start making friends. It's much easier than you think before you go. It's very easy to meet people there, especially through these ESN events. That was definitely probably my main concern actually before going to Italy, was I'm there for a year, how am I going to meet people, how am I going to make friends? But sort of after the first week, these issues were completely out of my mind. It was so easy, and I definitely say that the ESN network makes it so much easier to actually meet people and do things. It's a very well organised group. Don't be afraid to get involved and just speak to random people, and you'll make friends. It's the easiest thing ever. It's thinking about now, how concerned I was before. It sort of almost seems stupid in a way. For anybody who's studying in Italy or in Europe in general, I'd highly recommend looking out for your local university's ESN group. I think every university in Europe must have one, and it's, in my opinion, without a doubt, the best way to meet people and make friends on your study abroad. In terms of my actual life in general in Milan, I loved the city. I loved living there. It's definitely a more unique place. It's not traditional Italy. It's the financial capital. It's a much more sort of a hustle and bustle around the city. But I mean, there's always something to do, whether it's Fashion Week or Design Week, or a number of events or concerts. There's always something to do in Milan, which is sort of one of the great things about it. If you're moving to Milan specifically, check out platforms such as Yes Milano, and there are a few others, and it'll show you all of the events that are taking place, many of which are free, and it just helps you keep up to date if there's anything that you fancy going down to. It's also worth noting that Milan is a pretty expensive city actually to live in, particularly with rental costs. I think I was paying €850 a month, which was sort of around the average for the people that I knew there. However, I was in the centre of, I was next to the university, which is fairly central in Milan. So if you lived further out, then you could certainly find somewhere for cheaper, and it's pretty well connected. There's many buses, trams and metros, and these are very cheap to use. I think it was €22 per month for unlimited public transport access. So sort of keep in mind, if you were living further out, it's very cheap to commute in. The only other thing I'd mention with Italy specifically is if you're not an EU citizen, so if you're from the UK or Australia or anywhere like that that's outside of the EU, even though you need to get a visa, you also need to get a permesso di soggiorno when you arrive, within 8 days of arriving in the country. This was something that was actually a massive headache when I originally got there, because the system is not streamlined at all, and it was actually very difficult. So I'm going to make a separate video on that, or if you have any questions about the permesso di soggiorno specifically, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it. But like I say, that's just for non-EU citizens, so if you're lucky enough to be an EU citizen, you don't need to go through the complete headache that is. So that was just a brief overview of my experience studying in Politecnico di Milano. I'm going to make a few follow-up videos to go into more specific detail about Milan, about Italy, and about the university, as well as more general things about study abroad. Despite a few of the challenges, I mean, it was an incredible experience to be able to study abroad, and I'd certainly highly recommend it to anybody who's thinking about it. You just learn so much both inside and outside of your studies, and I think you grow so much as a person that it's definitely an experience that I'll value for a long, long time. If you have any questions about study abroad or moving to Italy or about the university specifically, please feel free to just drop them in the comments below, and I'll try as best as I can to help you out. Like I say, if you're interested, I'm going to be releasing some more videos on the specifics and going into more detail about my time studying abroad. So if you're interested, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And yeah, thank you for watching.